Welcome back to the channel. So today I am back with my advisor here in Paraguay, in Asuncion, and we're going to be talking about Maquila for services, in particular in practice, and what that looks like in Paraguay. So why don't you start us off by telling us what is Maquila for services and how does that differ from what Maquila typically looks like?
Okay, thank you, Nicole. In the first video, we talked about the classic Maquila, right? So originally, Maquila was designed for industrial operations, but with the years and in the last decade, the services industry started booming in many jurisdictions. So eventually, because in the law the law says that the subject of the transformation can be tangible or intangible. Therefore, the Maquila law applies to services, and that leads to new scenarios where you can use the Paraguayan jurisdiction to produce cheaper, let's say, software or any given service that you can deliver through internet, basically.
Okay, so that is interesting that there is a potential for the 1% tax rate through Maquila of services. So who would this potentially be best for? Would it be for the solopreneur? Would it be for the nomad capitalist with a full built-out team across the globe? What does that look like?
Well, those are two interesting niches. On one side, the solopreneur is looking for a place to spend less, which Paraguay is it's a cheaper place. Many things are cheaper, to rent is cheap, etc. So if you want to start operations from Paraguay, is a no-brainer, right? Especially paying 1% tax. So compared to in the world, there are many jurisdictions where when you pay 1% tax for exporting services, but Paraguay, I think, takes the lead because of the cost of living and many other factors. In the case of a nomad capitalist, it's even better because if you manage your own money, you set up your own operations. Let's say you have a business in Germany or any country in the world, and you can bring operations into Paraguay, and you can pay 1% tax on your own services if you compare to whatever you pay in your country of origin, which can be more than 30%, right?
Okay, so in Paraguay, there is the company formation. So let's say an EAS, you're paying 10%. Maquila, you're paying 1%. Does that cancel each other out at some point? Are you paying both of those taxes? One is export, one is the business tax only. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, answering that question, there is a separation between a Maquila program or a Maquila project approved by the Ministry of Industry and a normal company operating in a local country. In order to be approved to use Maquila, you need to separate. It's a separate company exclusively for Maquila operations. There's no confusion there.
Okay. So it's a completely different entity formation.
Yes.
And then so the 1% export tax, do you know what the tax rate is for that company each year?
In case of Maquila, it would be 1%.
Just straight, flat, 1%.
Yes. Let's say if you export by $1 million, so you have 1% of that as a tax.
Interesting. So who are some people or some industries that through the Maquila of services may not qualify to be under Maquila of services?
Well, first off, not illegal activity because of obvious reasons. Then I don't see limitations because the Maquila, as we talked in the previous chapter, is issued by a matrix company, the work order to a Maquila company. Therefore, as long as there is a instruction to accomplish a particular objective in an intangible way, there's no limitations.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So is it required to have a holding company in another country? Is that absolutely required? And then the order comes from that company into the Paraguay company?
Well, you can say so. We don't call it holding company, we call it the matrix company, which is that issue the order, the work order. You can say so. If you have a holding company, whatever, your country of origin or a tax haven, for example, is ideal because you can do cost arbitrage between jurisdictions.
Mhm. So we mentioned about the holding company. Talk to me a little bit more about that. Is that required? So you will have to take the time and cost to set up a holding company in another jurisdiction, another country, in order to fulfill Maquila in Paraguay?
Well, that's the basic condition. The original scenario assumes that you have already a company in existence. Having said that, there's no requirements of your particular company, either new or established. You need to have we call it the matrix company.
Mm-hmm.
The matrix company is the one that issues the work order and act as the initiator of the process.
Okay, so now with the typical Maquila that we talked about in the last video, you need the 60-40. So how does the 60-40 work for the digital services?
That's a good question. So the logic behind the 60% cost components from abroad, from the extra zone, which is extra Mercosur zone, applies in the sense of the cost structure. Let's say you are doing development. So your tools, let's say another component. Well, let's say with your tools you already reach 50% of your cost, and you have a remaining local cost, which can be energy, internet, and so obviously you have human resources as one of your main cost components. So part of my business, my service, is to make sure we comply with the law in that proportion.
Okay. Okay, so is the Maquila for digital services, would that be something of interest for somebody who wants a Paraguay residence but doesn't want to live here full time? Or is it really required to have Paraguay as your home base, your country of residence, and where you're operating all the services from?
No, not exclusively, but you need to have one legal representative that will need to be a resident. Only one.
Okay.
Then, as an owner, or as an part owner, you are not obliged to be a resident.
Okay. So one of the stipulations within Maquila law is that you have to hire locally. So tell us a little bit about what hiring local Paraguayans looks like for the Maquila of digital services.
Yes, the purpose of the law remains the same. The law incentivizes investment versus creating local jobs. The good news in Paraguay is that we have a huge demographic bonus that, we have 70% of the population between 17 to 35, and they are quick learners. Therefore, if you want to set up a team here in Paraguay, it might be an interesting scenario.
In mentioning about the locals, what is the local average minimum wage, and then what is the average salary that a local would make each month?
Yes, the minimum wage is around $365
US dollars.
US dollars. The good news regarding medium range salaries are low, are under the average in whole South America, because you see in Paraguay the local demand is not huge.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you have that advantage of bridging gaps.
Okay.
So in other words, you can get cheap talents.
Yeah, okay. So the minimum is just over 300 USD as of the beginning of 2024. What would you say, in your opinion, is the average that most people are getting paid for a standard job?
Well, if you are talking, let's say, web designers, web designers should be around a maximum $2,500, but you can get it by $1,500 onwards.
And where would you find this talent? Just out of curiosity, where would you go to find these workers?
There are local talent agencies that can solve that problem.
So within Maquila law in 2024, do you foresee any positive, negative changes? What could that look like?
I envision very good scenarios because this new government is center-right and is pro-investment. So I think the legal environment will get more secure. I mean, the government have all the intentions to protect investment. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to pick up.
So if you are interested in either setting up a service or, as we have spoken about, a potential digital service under Maquila law in Paraguay with a 1% tax rate, I think that's unheard of in most other countries around the globe, how you would start this process, you can reach out to us. All of the links are below. Feel free to reach out and we will get started on the business plan. And from the business plan, we'll present it to the Ministry of Industry on your behalf. There are quite a few other very involved steps in the process, but we will get that process started for you underway and help you throughout every stage of the process, whether that is hiring, having to find an assembly line, having to find a factory, whatever that may look like. We will guide you through that process. All the links are below. Thank you for being here today and for answering some questions.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you.